Welcome to Conversations Live. For more than a decade, we've brought you the best in books, entertainment, celebrity interviews, and current events. When the movers and shakers of the world have something to say to you, they say it to us first. Now celebrating 17 years of broadcasting success, here's your host, Cyrus Webb.
And welcome back, everyone, to Conversations Live. I'm your host, Cyrus Webb. Glad you all could join us once again, both for our radio audience here in Mississippi at WYAD 94.1 FM and WYADonline.com. We're glad that you all could be with us. Also, just tuning in to our online affiliates thanks to iHeartRadio and Amazon Music Podcast. Glad you all could be with us as well. We're excited to welcome Joshua Bitton to our program today. Joshua is someone you guys know from his work in television, film, and stage. He's kicked off this year in a really big way. We'll talk to him about a nomination that kind of began 2021 for him. But now he has a new project that's out I had a chance to watch called The-Tangle. If you guys have not heard about the film, of course we'll let you know how you can be able to see it for yourself. But Joshua, thank you so much for the time. Really appreciate it.
Oh, I'm really happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, the pleasure's definitely all mine. So as I said, you kind of began this year, and I think a lot of people were looking for some high notes after 2020. You kind of began 2021 with the high notes, with the nominations from, of course, the play that you were in, thanks to Ovation Awards. What has it been like for you, Joshua, to be able to do work that you love and then to have that work recognized?
This is a pretty amazing question to start with, because I grew up in New York City, and Stephen Adly Guirgis is a playwright who is my favorite playwright, I think, alive. He writes the New York that I grew up in the 90s, early 2000s, and his play Between Riverside and Crazy was one of those plays that I was sort of desperate to do or even to see. So 2020 ended for me in terms of professionally, and by ended I mean before we closed down, by getting the opportunity to complete an extended, nearly sold-out run at the Fountain Theater in L.A., and my castmates and I became very, very close. And so we spent a lot of time Zooming with one another in the beginning of the pandemic, really expressing our gratitude that we were able to have a completed run before everything shut down. And it was one of those things where the words I got to speak, the people I got to act with, the theater I worked at, the director I worked with, were all sort of perfectly aligned. So for me, the joy in doing that play was a sort of night-to-night thing for about 4.5 months here in L.A., and I felt really lucky. Yeah. In no way, shape, or form could I ever have imagined that I would be recognized for my work in the show, because the nominations came out in January, basically a full year and nearly a year at that point into being shut down, that Right. It really came out of nowhere. And one of the things that was really cool about the nominations were I was nominated for Best Featured Actor. Matthew Hancock, another actor in our show, was also nominated in the same category. Lisa Fernandez for Best Supporting, Best Featured Actress in a Play. And then our ensemble was recognized, as well as our director and some of our designers and the play. So after spending a year, searching for things to feel grateful for, find some positivity, this wave of, hey, we loved what you did, we want you guys to know how special that production was, came crashing down on me at just the perfect time. And so it's lucky, it's a lucky life in a lot of ways, to be able to, every day I get to work, I feel super blessed. And sometimes I work less than I want, sometimes I work, a wonderful amount, but there's never a day that I'm on set or on stage where I'm really not just happy and grateful to be there. So I feel like a really lucky person to have found it, to be honest.
And I appreciate you sharing that with us, Joshua. I think the other side of it is for people like myself who are either end up being the recipients of, your gifts, is that it helps us kind of return to some normalcy, right? Like with the release of the-tangle, we're used to to movies coming out the past year, not so much. So it's great to have something to look forward to. I want to talk about the other side of this journey for you, though, because as I mentioned in my intro, you've not only been able to do what you love in these different arenas, but you also been able to coach others. How does that feel to know not only are you pursuing your own goals and dreams, but you're helping other people to do the same thing?
It's funny because for me, to be fully honest, teaching acting began for me as something that was just an opportunity to help me pay my bills in between acting work. And I didn't really recognize the full gravity of the responsibility and also the joy that I would get out of it. Over the years, as I've taught more and more and been able to coach some really, special people in this field, it's really become a part of who I am. And, I had a really remarkable mentor named William Esper who passed away about 2 years ago. And Bill was like a second father to me, in many, many ways. And never did I ever imagine that I would hold some kind of space like that for a young actor, But it's become clear to me that I've been really lucky and blessed to have this effect on people who are pursuing, what is very much a dream. So it's first of all, it's made me a better person, to be honest. And the other thing that it has done is it's made me a better actor, because now I'm, over the years been faced with questions like, why should I do that? Why is that a useful tool? How will that help me? And things that I just kind of did maybe instinctively or intuitively, now I have to kind of put words to. And by doing that, it's opened up my understanding of the art form. So it's a really symbiotic relationship. It can be perceived as just giving, but the trust, the love, and the awareness of the work that I've been given by my students, not to sound cliche, but it's really true, has changed my relationship to the work. And interestingly enough, you opened up with the play, and there was a moment at the end of 2019 when I was shutting down my theater for the last class of the year, and I said, hey guys, this is the last class of the year, and one of my students said, no Josh, this is your last class of the decade. And there was something about the way she said it that made me realize, one, I'd been teaching for a decade, and two, how lucky I was. I was doing a recurring role on a TV show, so I was putting some money in my pocket. I was doing this play that I loved, and 3 nights a week I was working with young artists who inspired me every day. And I remember when I closed up the theater, I was really able, because of the statement of that student, to recognize the difference between last class of the year and last class of the decade, because as I was closing up the theater, right before I locked the door, I looked up and just looked around the theater, and I kind of gave this big internal thank you to whatever is bigger than me out there, that's making all this happen. God, a higher power, the universe, whatever you want to call it. I realized in that moment how lucky I was to be working in all these different elements and levels of the business. It was really, really cool. It really was.
Yeah. We're going to get into the tangle, Joshua, but I want to talk about the beginning for a moment, because I think it was interesting here. You talk about how you got into the coaching and, of course, what's come from that, but then, of course, what you've been able to do with your own career. Could you have imagined that you would, when you began this journey in the arts, we'll say, that you'll be able to make the impact that you've been able to have on so many?
No, definitely not. It's really wild. A number of years ago, I was lucky enough to do this guest star in a show called Harry's Law, and I had this speech in a courtroom about gay rights, the kind of speech that, from my friends who are, LGBTQ, that I remember when I got the role, I looked at it and I said, this has to be real. This has to come from a real place, or they're never going to forgive you. And I got an email, I don't know how he got my email, from a guy in Maryland who said, I'm a gay man in my 50s, and what you did on that screen echoed every frustration, every pain, every hope that I've forever felt. And thank you for putting it out there. You have a fan here on the other side of the country. And I was blown away, and that's just one example of, I've had Marines who've seen the Pacific come up to me and say, hey, man, you got it right. You understand why we do what we do, and thank you. If you would have told me as a young actor that things like that would happen, I would have thought you were messing with me. I would have by no means thought that this kid who grew up in New York City and the boroughs would ever have the opportunity to impact people in a really honest, deep way. I would have thought you were, joking. And so, no, I could not have imagined it. And still sometimes it's hard to recognize that I have the opportunity to do it, because I love it so much. So the fact that it impacts other people is mind-blowing.
And the two examples you just gave, Joshua, are even so different than the-tangle, right? So is that also part of the fun, that you are able to bring that passion to so many different types of roles?
Oh, God, yeah. I mean, how lucky, to do a small independent feature where, as a cast, we were helping our production designer build the set, to doing something like The Pacific, which is Spielberg and Hanks producing with, who knows, $250 million as a budget, and all the bells and whistles available to you, from playing a Marine in World War II to playing a gay man in current times just trying to save his brother's life. No, I couldn't have imagined it. And what it has done also, much in the same way I think that my students have done for me, because I've worked with such a variety of people from various walks of life, I've gotten the opportunity to at least try and step into the shoes of people whose perspectives and points of view are so different that it gives me, I think, a better understanding of a wider array of people than I grew up with or around, and more compassion for them, and hopefully in that more compassion for myself, to know that we all struggle through things, and those struggles are different based on where we come from and who we walk that path with.
Such a great point, and I think that's something all of us can aspire to be able to have that kind of impact. I want to say, for those who are just tuning in on the radio side or online, you're listening to Conversations Live. Joshua Bitton is our guest for this segment. We're talking with him not only about the journey he's been on as an actor and having that recognized, but also the impact he's been able to have on his students as well, and I should say by extension his audiences as well. He's a part of the talented cast that's the film The-Tangle. The reviews are already coming in, Joshua. I noticed when I was prepping for this segment, almost a couple dozen already been posted, and the film just released to us on the streaming services. What was it that attracted you to this project?
The language. It was the most challenging language I'd seen since I was working on Shakespeare when I was a drama student. It was dense. It was stylized. It was fast-paced in moments, and then it was straight-up poetic in others. It has a noir feel in this wildly sci-fi world, and it was a script that I had to read twice or three times to really get the nuances of it. So when Christopher Soren Kelly, who wrote and directed the film, asked me if I would be willing to play the role, I was blown away by the challenge of it and didn't know what would be in store for me, sort of putting on, the code of that character and the language of that character. And there were surprises that happened to me while filming, like in the moment, that I did not plan or anticipate. Emotional experiences where there were moments where Chris would yell cut, and I would look up and I'd say, I don't know what just happened. I don't know where that came from, but it was sort of a ride that I got to take, that I did not know where exactly we were going. And that to me is such an exciting prospect to be part of.
You just used a very interesting phrase, Joshua. I want to go back to it because I think it's interesting the way you said it, because I think it goes to what we were saying earlier about the different roles. You mentioned about putting on the coat of the character. And I'm always curious when I see some actors, when I have these conversations, how difficult it is sometimes to take the coat off. Because I know sometimes it can become comfortable, sometimes it can be unsettling, as the literal coat can be. Was it an easy thing for you to come out of it?
This is going to sound like a really weird tangent, but I recently sort of binge-watched the Jason Sudeikis show, Ted Lasso. And when I watched the show, I found it so joyful and so funny and so fun. And his character and the kind of rhythm and cadence of his character kind of infected me. I kind of wanted to walk around talking like Ted Lasso does, because he sees the world in such a positive way. And I was like, wow, I've really been affected by this. There was a period of time after we wrapped where I had this shaved head and this big beard and people, because of that, kind of in my day-to-day life, walking to the coffee shop or whatever, looked at me with way more distrust than I was used to, which is a real arc of the character in the film. That I found myself, it took a while to shed this feeling that people were accusing me of something for a bit, as well as I feel like Carter looks at the world through much muddied glasses. He doesn't trust anyone anymore, doesn't really think goodness exists anymore, and he's kind of made the decision to sort of just plod on through life, because that's what you do when things don't work out. And I have to say, for a little while after the shooting of this film, and it was an intense period, we shot for 10 days, 12-hour, 13-hour days over a 2-week period, that living in the language and in that sort of perspective, it took me a while to sort of get back to lightness and joy. I sort of had to purge by shaving my beard off, and as my hair slowly grew back in, I could start to see myself again, and maybe see the world through that point of view. So different characters will definitely affect me in different ways. Some are easier to shed than others, but this one took a bit, because I think it also took a while for me to really sink into the rhythm of it. And once I was in it, it felt like my rhythm,
Gotcha. Well, for our audience who have not seen the-tangle, if you're just hearing about it, you definitely want to head over to your favorite streaming site. Of course, our friends or Amazon Video, you guys can watch it there. You can rent or buy it there. We will be putting the link with those joining us via the podcast to make it easy for you guys to be able to get it. So, as you're kind of wrapping up this first quarter with some great things, Joshua, what are you looking forward to this year?
It's a bit. I was lucky enough to get a little bit of work over the last few months. I did an episode of the Nathan Fillion show, The Rookie, and I'd worked with Nathan before, and he's just everything you want him to be. He's funny, he's charming, which will be nice. And then I'm set to shoot a film in Oklahoma in April called Heartland Cartel. That I'm pretty excited about. It's a great role and I think a really great story. And then, to be honest, I'm excited to see what the world looks like when I'm able to give someone a hug, and when I'm able to, have friends over for dinner again, and really start to partake in life again. I talk about perspective, the things that I enjoyed, but sort of took for granted as being things that were going to be part of my everyday life. We've all had to ride this weird wave, and so I'm excited to just see what the other side of it looks like.
I get it. I totally understand that. I think a lot of people can mirror that. Joshua, really enjoyed this conversation with you. Again, The-Tangle is the film that's out now. You guys definitely want to see this. It has some very tense moments, but definitely entertaining. You'll enjoy that at your favorite streaming site. And Joshua, let our audience know, how can they stay connected with you?
You can follow me on Instagram. It's at Joshua Bitton. The same on Twitter. and then hopefully I just pop up on your TV and film screens, for as long as they'll let me do it.
Well, I think that will be quite a while. Joshua, really appreciate you and looking forward to our next conversation together.
All right. You have a great one. Thanks so much for your time and your insightful questions. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for that. I appreciate you, and we appreciate your audience for tuning in to another great segment of Conversations Live. Until next time, I'm your host, Cyrus Webb, saying as always, enjoy your day, enjoy your life, enjoy your world. Thank you all for choosing Conversations Live. Now let's go make today amazing. Take care.